Biggest lead of the game, but not for long, as Sophie Cunningham hits the triple. She is one of the toughest players in the WNBA, a physical enforcer, a competitor who has fought for every single thing her career gave her. Sophie Cunningham does not cry easily, but something happened this season that she could not keep to herself. Cunningham is starting to cook. Cunningham 3 is good. She went home to her family and tried to describe what it feels like to share a court with Caitlin Clark. And before she could finish, everyone in that room was in tears. Not from sadness, not from pain, from something far more powerful than either. Tonight, we are talking about that moment, what she said, what it means, and what it reveals about Caitlin Clark, the woman beside the phenomenon. To understand why Sophie Cunningham's words carry so much weight, you first have to understand who Sophie Cunningham is, and what it costs someone like her to be openly, unguardedly moved by anything. Cunningham grew up in Columbia, Missouri, the daughter of a family that breathed basketball. I'm in Columbia, Missouri, so I wouldn't be mad, but also need to, go to work. And my mom was running track at the time. And so, there's a family connection. Her father, Rex Cunningham, played professionally in Europe. Her mother was an athlete. Her siblings competed. The gym was not a destination for Sophie. It was simply where life happened. By the time she arrived at the University of Missouri as a freshman, she already carried herself with the certainty of someone who had been preparing for a long time. She played 4 years for the Tigers, became one of the most decorated players in program history, and left as a player defined by a specific combination of qualities that coaches love and opponents dread: relentlessness, physicality, and the kind of competitive fire that does not distinguish between practice and a playoff game. The Phoenix Mercury selected her in the 2019 WNBA draft. 1BA draft tonight. Sophie Cunningham here, all-time leading scorer in Missouri history. How are you? You're getting drafted tonight. Like, pretty wild time in your life. What followed was the slow, demanding process of establishing herself in the professional game. The process that every player goes through, but that cameras rarely follow, because the story of a player finding her footing in the league is less dramatic than the story of a player who arrived already fully formed. Cunningham worked. She played physical defense. She hit big shots when the moment required it. She became known around the league as the teammate you wanted in the foxhole, the kind of player who set the tone in the locker room and held the held line when games got hard. She was not a star in the conventional sense. She was not the player whose name headlined the marketing campaigns or whose piece appeared on the promotional materials. But within the culture of the Mercury, and within the broader culture of the WNBA, Cunningham had a reputation that meant something real. She was respected, she was trusted, and she was the kind of person whose emotional responses, when they happened, were not the product of sentiment or performance. When Sophie Cunningham felt something deeply, it was because the thing deserved to be felt deeply. So when the WNBA draft of 2024 arrived, and Caitlin Clark became the first overall pick, with the first pick in the 2024 WNBA draft, the Indiana Fever select Caitlin Clark, University of Iowa. When the most talked about player in the history of women's college basketball officially entered the professional game, Cunningham was not on Clark's team. Clark went to Indiana. Cunningham remained in Phoenix. But basketball is a league of intersections, of games and practices and competitions where the distance between teams collapses regularly. And over the course of the season that followed, Cunningham got close enough to witness something that she could not keep to herself. What does it look like when a player who has spent years sharpening herself against the hardest edges of professional competition suddenly finds herself sharing a court, not just against, but alongside someone operating on a different level entirely? That is the question that the rest of this story answers. Inside Caitlin Clark's world, there is a version of Caitlin Clark that the public knows. The three-point range that extends beyond any logical boundary. The logo shots. Clark from the logo. She gets it out of that left hand and it's money. The no-look passes that arrive at their destination before the recipient has fully processed that the ball is coming. The scoring records. The crowds. The cultural moment that turned a basketball player into something closer to a movement. And then there is the version that her teammates know. And that version is both more ordinary and more extraordinary than the public one, depending on which angle you approach it from. What Clark's teammates describe, in the moments when they choose to describe it at all, is not a player who arrives already glowing with greatness and leaves the building before anyone else wakes up. What they describe is someone who works, someone who arrives early and stays late, and treats the preparation with the same intensity that she brings to the actual game. The practices are not a warm-up for Clark. They are the game played at full speed with full focus. 6 on the shot clock. Clark, a deep 3! She does not have to alter her speed one bit! Against teammates who are themselves professional athletes trying to hold their own, against one of the most gifted offensive players the sport has ever produced. What would it feel like to guard Caitlin Clark in practice every single day? To be the body she dribbles around, the hand she shoots over, the defender she reads 3 moves ahead of before the play has officially begun. The Mercury players who faced her in regular season games had a taste of it, but to experience it daily, to be the person in the gym when the cameras are off and the crowd is not there, and it is just basketball, pure and stripped of everything else, that is a different education entirely. Teammates talk about the passes in particular. Clark sees passing lanes that other players do not register as lanes at all. We talked to Caitlin earlier today, and she talked about how that chemistry is getting so much better, and is there any better passer right now from the backcourt than Caitlin Clark? She sees the space between defenders, the timing of a cutter's movement, the precise moment when a teammate's defender commits half a step in the wrong direction, and she delivers the ball to that exact location at exact moment it needs to arrive. For a receiver on the end of one of those passes, the experience is disorienting in the best possible way. You did not know you were open. She knew you were open before you took the step that made you open. There is also the matter of what Clark does under pressure, which is perhaps the thing that separates her most sharply from nearly every other player in the professional game. Most players, even great ones, experience pressure as a narrowing. The game speeds up, the options feel fewer, the decision-making becomes reactive rather than proactive. Caitlin, you have made the decision to take your talents to the WNBA, which I'm secretly happy for, because I get to cover you. Clark experiences pressure as something closer to a sharpening. The bigger the moment, the clearer she seems to see it. The louder the crowd, the quieter the internal calculation appears to become. Players who compete against her or alongside her in high-stakes situations consistently describe the same phenomenon. She plays her best basketball when the stakes are highest, which is the rarest and most valuable quality a competitor can possess. There is something else that players who have been around Clark notice, something that does not always make it into the broadcast, but that every person who has shared a gym with her carries with them afterward. It is the way she treats the in-between moments, the warm-up routine she runs. While I'm warming up, I think this is a really great game for women's basketball. I think maybe it's the start of one. With the same focus she brings to a fourth-quarter possession, the film sessions where she asks the questions that everyone else in the room was thinking but had not yet articulated. The way she remembers details about the tendencies of opponents that she noted 3 games ago and applies them in real time, in the middle of a play, in a manner so seamless that it looks like instinct, even though it is actually preparation. Greatness for Clark is not a performance that gets switched on when the lights come up. It is the default state, the baseline, the way she simply exists inside the sport she has chosen. Understanding that, truly understanding it, from the inside, changes the way a professional athlete sees their own relationship to the game. When you watch someone operate at that level of integrations between preparation and execution, between thinking and doing, between seeing the play and making the play, it recalibrates your sense of what is possible. It does not make you feel smaller. It makes you feel the actual size of the sport more clearly. And that feeling for someone who loves basketball as deeply as Sophie Cunningham does carries an emotion within it that is very difficult to contain. For someone like Cunningham, who has built her entire career on competitive toughness, Cunningham, with a new career playoff high, on refusing to be outworked or outfought in any arena, witnessing that quality up close produces a very specific kind of feeling. It is not jealousy, it is not intimidation, it is something closer to recognition. The feeling of seeing something true about the sport you have dedicated your life to, expressed in a way you had not encountered before. The play that changed everything, thing every athlete who has been close to genuine greatness can describe a specific moment when the abstract became concrete. Not a general impression of someone's ability, but a singular crystallizing instant when the gap between what you thought you understood and what was actually happening in front of you became impossible to ignore. For Sophie Cunningham, that moment came from watching Caitlin Clark do something that great players do, but do it with a completeness, a grace, and an almost painful precision that made the familiar feel entirely new. Picture a late-game situation. The score is close. The defense has been designed specifically to take away Clark's preferred options. To funnel her left, to crowd her at the three-point line, to put bodies between her and the basket. She's back. Points in the quarter, including 3 long-range threes. Every defensive scheme in the league has a version of this plan, because every coach in the league has looked at the film and asked the same question. How do you stop her? The answer that most of them arrive at eventually is that you cannot stop her. You can only try to make her pay the smallest possible price for what she is going to do, regardless. And in that moment, with the defense doing everything right, with the crowd pressure at its highest, with the clock reducing the universe to a small and urgent space, Clark found something. A read that nobody else in the building had made. A pass that arrived so perfectly timed and so precisely placed that the recipient barely had to adjust. Or a shot released from a distance that defied the architecture of the play, that had no business going in by any reasonable assessment of the geometry, and went in anyway. That is the moment Cunningham carried home. Not the celebration that followed. Not the highlights package or the social media reaction. The moment itself, the human moment, the one that happens in the space of 2 or 3 seconds on a basketball court, and contains within it almost an 8-cross midcourt. Naz Hillman has it denied. Austin sends it back. Clark with numbers. Bounce pass Howard. Something that is very hard to put into words without sounding like you are exaggerating. She tried to describe it to her family. She sat with the people who know her best. The people who have watched her compete since she was a child in a gym in Missouri. Who have seen her at her most determined and her most vulnerable. Who have never needed her to perform anything for them, because they already know exactly who she is. And she tried to tell them what it was like to be on the court when Caitlin Clark does what Caitlin Clark does. The challenge of that conversation is something that anyone who has ever tried to communicate a profound experience to someone who was not present will immediately recognize. You have the memory, you have the feeling, but the words keep arriving slightly too small for what you are trying to carry with them. You say something, and it sounds like a description of a basketball play, and you know that what you actually experienced was not a basketball play. Clark, looking into Cunningham, lost it. Cunningham hits a 3. It was something that used a basketball play as its medium. Something that happened in the space of between the action and the meaning of the action, in the place where sport and human excellence and the rare privilege of proximity all converge at once. The tears when they came were not surprising to anyone who understands what sport can do at its highest level. They were not tears of sadness. They were not tears of inadequacy. They were the tears that come when someone finds the right words for something they have been carrying quietly. And the words, once spoken aloud, reveal the full weight of what was being held. Cunningham was not crying because Clark had done something to her. She was crying because Clark had done something to her understanding of what the sport she loved was capable of being. There is a kind of beauty in that, a kind of grace in the image of one fierce, dedicated, hard-earned competitor sitting with her family and weeping, not from exhaustion or defeat, but from the overwhelming privilege of having witnessed something extraordinary at close range. When toughness meets tenderness, Cunningham is not alone in this. She is simply one of the more vivid examples of a pattern that has been playing out across the WNBA since Caitlin Clark arrived. A pattern in which players whose professional identities are built on toughness, composure, and competitive hardness find themselves unexpectedly and genuinely moved by what they experience in Clark's orbit. The league itself has changed in the time since Clark entered it, not just in terms of attendance figures or television ratings or the financial present. WNBA is out with new TV viewership numbers. It says the season that began on May 14th has been the most watched in the league's history, averaging 1.3 million viewers per game. Conversations happening in front offices across the country. Though all of those things have changed dramatically, the league has changed in something harder to quantify. There is a different energy in the buildings, a different quality of attention, a sense among the players who have been in the WNBA for years and who fought for every small increment of recognition the league received before Clark arrived, that the door they were knocking on for so long has finally been pushed wide open. Some of those players have complicated feelings about that. The complexity is legitimate and worth acknowledging. But within that complexity, something consistent emerges. When the players who have been Clark's teammates or close competitors speak honestly about what she brings to the game, there is an appreciation that goes beyond the statistics, an acknowledgement of something in the way Clark plays that reminds people, veterans and rookies alike, of why they fell in love with basketball in the first place. The no-look passes that make arenas gasp, the long-range shots delivered without hesitation at the most consequential moments. That shot or a pass. I mean, just incredible. Splitting the defense, and she knows how to get it. The vision that operates on a frequency that other players can see, but cannot quite access themselves. These are the things that reduce professional athletes to genuine astonishment. And genuine astonishment, the real kind, not the performed kind, is something that very few things in life can produce in people who have spent decades developing expertise in a field. Clark produces it regularly in people who have every reason to be difficult to impress. There is also the matter of how Clark conducts herself off the court. In the interactions that happen in tunnels and warm-up sessions, and the quiet spaces before and after games where professional athletes show each other who they actually are. What her peers describe is a player who has not mistaken attention for importance, who treats the business of the game with seriousness, and treats the people around her with genuine respect. The combination of extraordinary talent and genuine human decency is rarer than it should be. When it exists, the people who experience it feel it. Sophie Cunningham has spent her professional life earning respect the hard way. Through competition, through sacrifice, through the accumulated weight of years spent giving everything she had to a sport. Sophie Cunningham, doing a good job, just taking what the defense gives. Good post-up on the strong side. That does not always give everything back. When someone like that is moved to tears talking about a teammate, the emotion carries a different kind of authority. It is not the reaction of someone new to the sport encountering greatness for the first time. It is the reaction of someone who knows exactly how hard greatness is to achieve, and who has now seen it expressed in a way that exceeds even their experienced understanding of what was possible. When greatness brings you to tears, step back from the basketball for a moment. Step back from the statistics, the records, the television numbers, and the cultural conversation that has surrounded Caitlin Clark since the day she entered the professional game. Step back from all of it and consider what is actually being described when Sophie Cunningham sits with her family and cries, talking about a teammate. What is being described is impact. Not impact in the promotional sense, but impact in the oldest and most genuine sense. The kind that one human being produces in another when they do something extraordinary in front of someone fully equipped to recognize what they are witnessing. Cunningham is not a casual observer. She is a trained, experienced professional athlete with years of competitive basketball behind her. Her standard for what is worthy of tears is extraordinarily high. The fact that Clark clears that standard, clears it so completely, that the emotion arrives involuntarily in front of family, says something precise and important. Consider what Clark did in her rookie season alone. She finished as the WNBA's leading scorer. She broke the league's single-season assists record for a rookie, courtesy of Caitlin Clark's 13th assist. Just reading the defense so well. Indiana outscored Twill. She drew crowds to arenas that had never seen sellouts before. Road games, neutral sites, preseason exhibitions. The Indiana Fever went from one of the league's quietest franchises to one of its most watched overnight. Those are the numbers the public saw. What Cunningham saw was something different. The daily version of the person producing those numbers. The early arrivals, the extra shooting sessions, the film work, the competitor who in a loss to the Chicago Sky that dropped Indiana to 3 wins and 7 losses in the early season, came back the next game and delivered one of her finest performances. 33 points, 8 assists, refusing to let a difficult start define the direction of her year. That is the version of Clark that gets carried home. Not the highlight, the human being behind it. It means that the extraordinary has not become ordinary through exposure. For the people closest to Clark, familiarity does not diminish the impact, it deepens it, because proximity reveals what the cameras do not capture: the preparation, the consistency, the gap between what Clark does and what even elite professional athletes can replicate, observed not in a single viral moment, but across the accumulated weight of an entire season spent in the same building. What Clark produces in the people around her goes beyond impressive. When veteran players like Kelsey Mitchell, Clark leading Mitchell for the layup, herself a scorer of genuine quality, speak about what it is like to play alongside Clark, the consistent theme is not admiration for the statistics, It is astonishment at the vision, the passes that arrive before the receiver has processed they are open, the reads that treat a live defensive scheme the way most people treat a solved puzzle, already finished, already understood, the answer visible before the work has begun. That is what Cunningham was trying to describe to her family. Not a stat line, not a game recap, the experience of being present when Caitlin Clark plays basketball the way Caitlin Clark plays basketball, and the feeling of carrying that home because some things are too significant to hold alone. The fans watching through a screen get something real, but Sophie Cunningham gets the original, unfiltered, at full resolution, in real time, and it made her cry. That tells you everything about what Clark is doing for the sport, and we are lucky, every single one of us, to be watching it happen right now. Sophie Cunningham has spent her career proving she belongs through sacrifice, physicality, and refusing to be outworked. She is not sentimental, not soft, and yet she sat with her family and told them what it feels like to share a court with Caitlin Clark. The passes nobody sees coming, the shots that defy all logic, the competitor who peaks when the pressure is highest. By the time Cunningham finished talking, everyone was in tears. This is what that moment tells us about greatness felt from the inside. Drop a comment. Has Clark ever made you emotional? Like this video, and stay with us for another incredible Clark story coming next.